Welcome to the Decentralized Mind podcast. I'm your host, Emanuela, and today I have Danielle Hamilton, who is a nutrition practitioner who runs a program called Blood Sugar Mastery, specializes in hypoglycemia, and of course also works with clients one-on-one. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And the first thing that piqued my interest when I found you in the sphere is that you're talking about hypoglycemia. I don't think there's a lot of people who talk about hypoglycemia.
No.
And I used to have hypoglycemia,
Me
like
too.
really badly for
Really?
a long time. And it's funny because it happened to me right after I tried the pill.
Mm.
That's how I got it. Like
Wow.
before
Interesting.
then, it was just, and it was pretty bad. And I actually discovered by accident, I bought the finger prick monitor and I discovered that my hypoglycemia was being triggered by light.
By light.
Yeah. So every time I would go indoors, I would have this drop, like spike first, and then I would have an excessive drop.
Wow.
And then even if the drop didn't stay low or didn't go down that much, I would have all the classic symptoms you talk about all the time, you know?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So
Interesting. I've never heard that one. I've certainly heard people struggling out in the heat.
yes.
So, with all the recommendations that we have about getting outside and getting vitamin D from UVB light, I have a huge percentage of my people where they really struggle with heat. And so they can't do a lot of these practices. And so we have to start them with a nice, gentle morning light and things like that, and blocking blue light at night because we know that's really dysregulating on blood sugar, insulin, cortisol, all that.
Yeah. And before we kind of get into this a little bit more, because I got lots of follow-up questions about that, can you maybe share how you got into this? Like, what was your journey to figuring out the hypoglycemia?
Yeah, I had hypoglycemia, but I had no idea. So the way it manifested for me was that I had a lot of symptoms of PCOS, now called PMOS. And I was struggling with my weight, with acne, with my really long cycles, PMS, PMDD. Like if it was an acronym that started with a P, I probably had it. And and this was right after I switched my diet to a paleo diet. But I had moved from Florida to New York. And so interestingly, now I can see that there was a light story with this, that diet was really good for me. In Florida, I was doing great. And then I moved to New York and it was the winter and I was still eating like plantains and having kombucha and coconut sugar and making recipes with lots of honey and, having bananas blended in my iced coffee. It was really good. But I can't even imagine the blood sugar spikes I was having. But it was just such a mismatch for the setting that I was in. It was like gray and snowy and buildings and, not obviously a carb growing in sight. Obviously, it wouldn't be growing on that land, but still, no carbs would be able to grow in that environment. And here I am eating this like almost tropical diet and I was gaining weight. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? Because eating paleo helped heal my allergies, my asthma, my chronic sinus infections, and all these things got better. But how is this possibly making me worse? And so it took me years to kind of understand that PCOS was a metabolic condition. I didn't know that it was. But I was convinced. I didn't believe my doctor when he told me I would just have to take the pill for the rest of my life and that there's no cure and all that stuff. And so I just continued looking on my own. I did move back to Florida, but things didn't get better right away. And I then heard a podcast that said PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. But then I just talked to my friend who said PCOS is not the diabetes of the ovaries. But hearing that was all I needed to understand that there was a blood sugar metabolic component to this. And so all of a sudden I realized how little I knew about blood sugar. I had learned so much about, holistic health and nutrition. And I knew nothing about blood sugar because it was confusing and I didn't really get it. And I was like, I don't have diabetes. I don't have to pay attention to this. So I was like, cool, I'll just skip that chapter in all the books that I'm reading. And so, yeah, I just kind of skipped over all the blood sugar stuff and then realized, okay, I have to go back to this because I have no idea what symptoms of diabetes even are, no less what are the symptoms before someone gets diabetes. So this was what I spent the whole sort of first several years of my career talking about, is like, what are these early signs of metabolic dysfunction, blood sugar dysregulation? And often it starts with hypoglycemic symptoms. It often starts with that, but I'll pause that for a second and keep going with my story. But what I realized after I started working on healing my PCOS, which was through optimizing my blood sugar and metabolic health, it went away in 5 months after I started doing things to it, that I didn't realize, but I'm like, oh my goodness, I had hypoglycemia. So the symptoms that I had were, well, I was going to the doctor a bunch of times to get blood work. Every single time I went, I hated it because I was dizzy. I felt like I was going to pass out. One time I almost did. I felt so anxious and I was shaking like crazy. And my blood sugar every time was 60. So let me get my calculator out and divide to get the millimoles for you guys. Divide by 18 because I know you're in Canada. So 3.3. My blood sugar was 3.3 or 60. And so it was very low. And I felt horrible, but none of the doctors said anything about the blood sugar being that low. No one flagged it or anything. One more functional doctor, he circled it on the blood work, but didn't say anything to me about it.
Jeez.
So that was the closest I got. It was circled. And so still nothing. But I felt those symptoms if I didn't eat. So I started to notice that I would eat anytime I was leaving the house. And one time I was going out to eat and I'm like, why am I eating right now? I'm going to a literal restaurant to go eat. Like, what is this behavior? Like, I caught myself in it being like, okay, why are you eating though? And I realized that it was because if it took us a long time to get a table, if the food took a long time to come, I would not be okay. And so I always carried food with me. So before I was paleo, it was like a granola bar. Then after I went paleo, it was like a Lara bar, like a fruit and nut bar. And so it just kind of switched to like almonds and blueberries or, something. But I was always grazing on something. I was always snacking on something because I almost kind of needed like a little sugar drip throughout the day. And I used to say, I don't have a sweet tooth. All my teeth are sweet. Because I had such a sweet tooth. I was always thinking about sugar, wanting to have something sweet after a meal. And I also, that's not like a differential diagnosis for hypoglycemia. Some people want that because they're insulin resistant. There's different reasons. Sometimes it's emotional support chocolate, different reasons, but that was still in my picture. And I would wake up and I would need to eat immediately. So I used to just think I was a breakfast person. That's why I hated doing fasting blood work. But if I woke up and didn't eat right away, I would be really shaky and anxious. And then I used to also get really shaky after coffee. And I was like, oh, I'm just caffeinated. No, I tested my blood sugar once again. It was 60. So 3.3. So I was waking up, my blood sugar was in the 60s. And then I would have coffee just first thing, and then my blood sugar would spike and then go back down to the 60s. And so that's why I was just kind of grazing all day. So I didn't have a continuous glucose monitor at this time. So I do not know exactly what the picture looked like, but it was pretty clear that I was hypoglycemic all the time. And so that's one of the things that I put together after the fact. And then as I started coaching people with blood sugar, I started to see that picture, certainly of people with high blood sugar, insulin resistance, what we know now, leptin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. Sure, certainly I saw a lot of those people. But I started to get more and more people who had more of those symptoms like me. And some of them were even at a place where they were more severe. And so my first ever hypoglycemic client, Roseanne, shout out to her. She holds a very special place in my heart. She's thriving now. She just graduated with her master's. I mean, and this was a person who couldn't drive. She couldn't be alone with her kids. She couldn't work. And her strategy, what had helped her one time was eating a Hershey's bar. And so she thought that was what helped her not have these sort of episodes. And when she saw me, she was eating 7 Hershey bars a day, just trying to get her sugar back up. And it was unbelievable. And her process to heal it took time, but she is now, she has a business. She's like crushing it. So I mean, she went from having the ambulance called on her to thriving. So a lot of people who are in this place of feeling really severe and really hopeless and like they have to eat all the time and no flexibility and no ability to tolerate exercise or heat or any sort of stressor, and they're just exhausted and they're eating and they're not even hungry, but they have to eat. Like that is the reality for a lot of my clients. And they can't even shower without a crash. Like I get that question sometimes. Do you have any recommendations for showering? And it's like, that's wild when our body feels so unsafe that it cannot handle even a tiny, tiny extra little bit of stress. And so, before we even dive into anything, I just want you, to know if you're listening to this and you happen to be struggling with hypoglycemia, that it is fully reversible and that you don't have to live by just eating every couple of hours. Even if you've managed to stabilize yourself in that way, it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to be this sort of prisoner to your blood sugar for the rest of your life.
And I think you also say something that I think is important that I've seen you say on socials, is that sometimes people get hypoglycemia symptoms even if their blood sugar appears to be normal,
Yeah.
which I know I used to have that happen to me where literally like I would lose the ability to drive in that moment because I lost depth perception entirely. And
Whoa.
it's like my blood sugar, when I started measuring it, right, it wasn't always that bad,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
I had all those symptoms.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. And so that's why I kind of call hypoglycemia metabolic hypoglycemia, because if you go to YouTube or if you just look up on, ChatGPT, it'll be like, oh, if your blood sugar is under 70, then you have hypoglycemia. Some places will use 50 as a metric. And so by that metric, I wouldn't have been hypoglycemic. I mean, I almost passed out and cracked my head on the freaking pavement. There's a legitimate problem happening when you lose depth perception when you drive. There's something happening. So that's, I always, always, always say, always the symptoms over the number, because these devices are also fallible. The lab might be incorrect. Always what you feel is real. What you feel is happening, and whether the number is in a low range or not. And so a couple things about this. Number one, a lot of people who have prediabetes and type 2 diabetes it's a known thing that they get lows when they are in a higher range. So I had a client who came to me who had hypoglycemia since she was in high school, and now she's retired. So it's been decades that she's had the hypoglycemia. And I asked her what she does when she gets hypoglycemic, which is several times a day for her entire life. She just said that she would drink orange juice or have some crackers or just something to get it back up. And so she had never had a CGM. And I was like, the continuous glucose monitor, if someone doesn't know what that is. So I was like, would you be open to not changing anything at all? And like, we wait to get a CGM on you and like, let's see what your numbers are. She's like, sure. We put a CGM on her. I got to get my calculator. And her blood sugar was spiking to 350, which is, drumroll, 19.4. Okay. So her blood sugar was spiking to 350, and her lows were if she went under 170 or 9.4. So if she went under 170 or 9.4, she would feel like her blood sugar was 50 and about to pass out. So that to me is like, what's happening when that's happening? So this can happen all along the spectrum. So we see this in type 2 diabetes, which this woman was clearly type 2 diabetic, which her doctor missed, by the way. What? How do you miss that?
How do you miss
I
that
don't know.
bad?
I do not know. And we got her down into the pre-diabetic range in 6 weeks. So, I mean, the changes can happen really quickly. But then and she doesn't have diabetes or pre-diabetes anymore, which is exciting. So that's happening when someone has diabetes, and then pre-diabetes, same thing can happen, but also pre-diabetes, it can happen as well. So I have a lot of people where when they've had this for a while, I usually ask them, do you feel bad if your numbers go, let's say, below 90 or about below 5? Is that like the cutoff for you? And they're like, yes. I don't know why this seems to be the cutoff. It could be anywhere. I call that number your basement, the number that if you go below, you start to feel symptomatic. So knowing that that's my basement, I can't go any further than that. That's where when we start working on healing, we want to make sure your blood sugar is not going below that, because your body is stressed below that right now. And my theory is that when the body has such a lack of metabolic flexibility, meaning it doesn't have the ability to burn any stored energy like glycogen or stored sugar in our liver. It doesn't have the ability to burn body fat, whether we're leptin resistant, we have low leptin, we have high insulin levels. All of those hormones are saying either don't use this fuel, or it's saying we don't have any fuel. So if the body thinks we're out after this, it's going to want to keep a little bit of a buffer. So I think of that like crashes in the normal or high range as just a manifestation of a lack of metabolic flexibility. So the body is essentially saying, I can only burn what you eat, so keep feeding me. And you can see how that could perpetuate and drive someone to get prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, right? So if you always have to keep your blood sugar over 90, and then it's like, ooh, it kind of feels better over 95 or over 100, or you could see how it just keeps ticking up. But we can also go the other way. And so with my clients, what we see during healing is that they're like, let's say that basement was at 90 or 5. They'll be like, oh my gosh, my blood sugar was 85 today and I felt fine. Oh my gosh, my blood sugar went to 80 and I felt fine. I'm like, okay, let's move that threshold on your CGM. So they start to get more flexibility, and we want them to at least get to 70 with feeling good. So yeah, great point.
Yeah, because, and if you think about a simple way to think of it for, the listener, if you think about the word resistance, right? It literally makes sense why you don't need to get all the way down there to a 2 or 3 to feel bad, because you're resistant. So your body doesn't see what's happening. It's blind. And whatever it's decided, like you said, that basement is, that's it.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting that so many people turn to sugar. And when I was doing research in hypoglycemia, like that's the recommendation all over the internet. If you're like reactive, which is the term that was more popular then anyways, I don't know if
no, it's still popular out there.
Yeah.
People think that all hypoglycemia is reactive hypoglycemia. They do.
Right. So if you're in this quote unquote reactive, right, or metabolic hypoglycemia state, all the recommendations are eat sugar, eat sugar, eat sugar. And I found out very quickly that made things worse. My turn to was milk. Like to this day, I can trigger a hypoglycemia episode by going into a friend's house without my glasses and without a shirt. And if I'm in there and they have like 3, 4 Wi-Fi boosters, a lot of Wi-Fi devices, and all of the LED lights on, and I don't bring a sweater and I don't bring my glasses, I will get a hypoglycemia episode. And to this day, my turn to is milk. Now, I'm not autoimmune, right? So like this is not for everyone to be like, I'm going to try
how sensitive you are to the lights.
Yes.
And if you're like this, there's got to be other people like this. So that is a really interesting connection. I mean, I've seen CGM data where someone's blood sugar was like this overnight, like a heart rate. And then they turned off the Wi-Fi at night and there were no drops and their blood sugar was stable overnight. So that I've seen, but that was overnight data. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And you know what what I think I want to share, because I want to hear your input on this,
Mhm.
is that, you know, so I way before I knew anything really, and I was trying to go low carb and do some intermittent fasting, and I kind of trained myself just enough that I could go like 4 hours without a snack,
Uh-huh.
right? And then I was trying to lose weight because I couldn't lose weight. And I went on this now very popular program called the Gina Livy program, where
Mhm.
she's got you eating every few hours. And
Mm.
I lost weight, but after that, my hypoglycemia came back with like, it was a
Vengeance.
monster, which is like, you know, what do you think that people out there are like, I need to eat more often, but then by not attempting to stretch or maybe going for fat mixed with sugar, God forbid, over a
Mhm.
candy bar is
Mhm.
driving that hypoglycemia to get even worse?
Yes. So this is what I talk about when I say the management of hypoglycemia makes it worse. So if you are managing hypoglycemia, it makes it worse because you have to eat so often. We should not have to eat that often unless we might be, let's say, training for a specific endeavor, and we're like, people are weightlifting and they're trying to put on muscle and they're doing this thing. It's a little different. But just eating, by the way, if you're watching the video, I have a big fluffy cat next to me and his hair just like kind of gets stuck on my face. So I'm just like rubbing, getting cat hairs off my face. So I'm not on substances or anything. So anyway, managing hypoglycemia makes it worse because you have to eat so often. And when people are correcting their lows with sugar, it may help in the moment because certainly it gets your blood sugar back up. But if you have a working pancreas, AKA you do not have type 1 diabetes, then correcting a low with sugar, unless it's an emergency, if it's an emergency, you absolutely may need to. And this is not medical advice, but this is just some general information that you can use as education, as things to try if you feel safe. So, if you need to, there are some times where it is an emergency and you need like a fast acting glucose, right? But the idea is we don't want it to get to that place because then we'll need the sugar. So, having a something to eat at the very first sign of a low and having that something have maybe some protein, fat, and a little bit of carb is sort of a good first step, because then instead of putting your blood sugar straight back up, we're getting it over, right? So we don't want to have a giant spike, because then what's going to happen? We're going to get a ton of insulin, so much insulin because we just skyrocketed our blood sugar, and then we send it straight back down. And so we're having a very sharp peak of our blood sugar. And it is very, very stressful for the body. And it feels really uncomfortable, especially for my people who are on this ride who feel this. It feels really bad when our blood sugar changes that quickly. It often activates the sympathetic nervous system. So we're getting heart palpitations, maybe anxiety, panic. We feel terrible. We feel like we're going to pass out, fatigue, sweats, nausea, headaches, you name it. There's a brain fog, difficulty concentrating, feeling like you're going to pass out, actually passing out. All of those things can happen. So we don't want to be on this roller coaster and be spiking our blood sugar up. We want to think about getting it over so then we don't get a lot of insulin. So if we have just a small amount of carbs, we need just a small amount of insulin, and that's a small margin of error. And so that's kind of how we want to think about this. But also going back to what you said about stretching out your meals, that's one of the things that I do with my clients. So step one to heal hypoglycemia is to stabilize. And what we do is, by any means necessary, whatever we need to eat, however often we need to eat to keep the blood sugar from crashing, That's step one. But most people stop there because they're like, okay, I'm not crashing. But what did we say earlier? That's going to make everything worse. So we can't stop there, but it is a necessary first step. So that's why when I try to make content about this, it's so confusing unless it's long form like this, because it's a procession. It's a journey. It changes. What we do changes over time. So it's very hard to explain. And it's also hard to figure out on your own because you're like, how do I change this? But what ends up happening is we get stable by any means necessary. Okay. So maybe that looks like someone is eating 8 times a day because they need to eat every couple of hours and maybe overnight in order to not have crashes. What I say that does is that it takes, I think about the little adrenal glands, which are sort of pyramid shaped. They sit on top of your kidneys, and I picture them like in Mexico on a beach, just like chilling. And they're just resting, they're chilling, they're laying back, and they're not being asked to manage or to regulate blood sugar. And so what does that mean? When our blood sugar crashes and we don't have access to that backup fuel, like glycogen in our liver or body fat, when the blood sugar is going really low, the adrenals come in and they pump you with stress hormones that create new glucose. That's why it's called glucocorticoid hormones. So the adrenals produce these stress hormones that create new glucose and spike your blood sugar up. This often happens in the middle of the night. That's why people wake up with a pounding heart, or they wake up with an anxiety attack, right? So what we want to do is avoid using the adrenals, because that is so dysregulating for the body. It's driving a lot of the problems. So we want to send those little adrenals on vacation. We want to be stable by any means necessary. And then we start to add things to the plate to help someone naturally go longer between meals. Now, people often think they're like, I need to have some carbs right now. Like, I know you do. Your body's a sugar burner. It has to have some carbs right now. It cannot not have those carbs right now. I get it. And that's why we don't start with taking away carbs. We start with adding fats and proteins and helping the person go longer between meals so that they don't have to eat as often.
Okay.
So another thing that often comes up here is that in order to add the protein and fat to the plate, we need to optimize someone's digestion. And so that's where we have to work on stomach acid support, bile flow support, because people often can't digest, break down, and absorb all those healthy fats and proteins. And there's some weird signs of digestive issues that people they're not really aware of. So obviously things like constipation or diarrhea, those are obviously digestive issues, but burping or hiccups, even like an hour after eating, very common sign of low stomach acid. Weak fingernails, chipping, breaking fingernails, not having a taste for breakfast, or just being sort of turned off by meat, having a history of a plant-based or vegan diet. These are some things that can drive low stomach acid, and often having like an upper belly fullness where it feels like the food is just sitting there, like you're not hungry for your next meal because it hasn't fully digested. Having heartburn is a sign of low stomach acid. So that would be a sign that we need to support stomach acid production. And then a lot of people struggle with fat digestion. And this happens a lot more as they start increasing healthy fats. So what we often see is definitely constipation. Some people have urgent bowel movements. Some people, we're going to talk about poop. We've already started, but here we go. Many people have light, floating, shiny, or clay colored stools. And so that would be a sign that your bile is not flowing adequately. Many people get very dry skin, peeling, itchy feet, and hormonal deficiencies, just having very low hormones overall, low fat soluble vitamins, and all of there's some other ones, headaches over your eyes. Nausea is a big one for fat digestion, pain over the right side rib cage, or like a diffuse pain inside, or not having a gallbladder. All those things are going to impact our our ability to digest the fats that help us go long periods without eating. And so those are just some things that we do to help someone go longer between meals. Another one is getting minerals. So many people are super, super deficient in minerals because they've had so many blood sugar spikes. And when the adrenals pump you with stress hormones, that's sort of a nutritionally expensive process. It requires a lot of nutrients to do that. And often we get really drained in salt, some people in potassium, some people in magnesium. But for some people, some of my hypoglycemics, they cannot take magnesium or potassium or they drop low. So it's finding that balance that works for each person. But adding those things in, all of a sudden, effortlessly, people are like, oh my gosh, I started to go instead of 2 hours between meals, I went 3, and then I went 3.5, and then I went 4. So we get to start effortlessly dropping out some of these meals without stressing the body, without pushing through hunger. Now, I think that's an important thing that we don't try to push. Once you feel the first symptom that you're low, I believe you should eat, not push it off. And you said something really important about like trying to lose weight. So can I speak to that? I want to speak to that, but I wanted to leave you time to jump in case you wanted to comment or add anything.
No, let's jump to that because that
Okay.
goes in the direction I want. I have some follow-ups,
Yeah.
but I want to hear about this first.
Okay. So a lot of people with hypoglycemia also want to lose weight. So they say, well, I shouldn't eat this often, or I shouldn't add this much fat to my plate, or I shouldn't have this many carbs, or I should definitely go to the gym. Now, a hypoglycemic body in certain individuals, some people can handle some of those stressors, but I work with people who have very, very low stress tolerance. And so if you think about all of the strategies to lose weight, not eating between meals, not eating before bed, fasting, cutting carbs, working out, every single one of those strategies is very hard on people with hypoglycemia. It makes the hypoglycemia worse because all of those strategies are helping people who have excess metabolic issues. So like issues of excess, so high blood sugar, high insulin, and high leptin. So it helps to bring those things down. So someone who's hypoglycemic, it might just tip them over the edge because all of those things are healthy stressors. But a hypoglycemic body is so stressed that even a healthy stressor is too much stress. So think about someone with a sprained ankle. You wouldn't tell them to go on a hike because hiking's good for you. You would say, oh, your ankle needs to heal, and then you could do the healthy thing. So think about this hypoglycemia like the sprained ankle. So yeah, certainly it's great to go sit out in midday sunlight. It's great to go for a walk, but your body might not be able to do that. So how do you lose weight? When you have weight to lose and you have hypoglycemia, this is going to be hard to hear, but don't worry, there's a happy ending. You have to focus on the blood sugar first before you touch the weight loss, because every weight loss strategy, is going to make the blood sugar worse, and then we're not going to heal. So we have to just start with the blood sugar stuff. And often it's kind of just like we're getting to the weight loss. We're going to get to the weight loss. We just have to go around the back door. So what happens is if we can finally get you to stop eating 8 times a day, and now you're down to 4 times a day, guess what we just did? We effortlessly helped you stop eating so much between meals, so you don't have to eat as often, right? So it's if we push the body to do it, it will backfire. But if we do it in this nice, gentle, methodical, slower way, the body's like, oh, I don't need to eat that often. And then levels start to balance out, and it's like, oh, I can kind of burn some of this fat that's on my body. Okay. So it doesn't need you to eat as much. And then you can start developing resiliency. So the next level after the sort of stability is getting into a state where you're burning fat as fuel. And so this is really helpful for the mitochondria. It's helpful for that metabolic flexibility. And that's where we see people like, oh my God, I wasn't even hungry for dinner. What's happening? Like, how did I go from eating 8 times a day to like really only needing to eat like maybe two meals and a mini meal. Like, what's happening right now? And I'm like, yeah, this is what healing looks like. It's possible. So then when we get into this fat burning place, that's when so much more healing happens and we start to see a lot of resilience. So one of my clients in this round of blood sugar mastery, it was like every week she got back in a new little stressor. So she's like, I walked around the block a couple times and I felt great. It's like, amazing. And then she's like, I started doing some weights and I felt really good. It's like, great. And then she's like, I started to go outside during high UV times and I'm doing really well. And so every week she was getting back some new levels of these stressors. And now what's going to happen? She's going to be able to effortlessly lose weight because she's going to be walking. She's going to be able to do weights. She's going to be able to get UVB and get more sunlight and get outside more. All these things are going to help. So it happens, but we can't focus on it first. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, it's interesting because when you are trying to lose weight, like you said, and when you're metabolic hypoglycemia, you cannot burn any other fuel other than sugar. And it's like, your mitochondria is that damaged that I like to say, sugar is the easiest thing, then comes protein, and then comes fat. And like fat's the hardest. So you have to build your way to it. And oftentimes when people hear about the stuff, that I've seen you talk about, and I know I talk about it a lot, like getting lots of sun and going out for sunrise. And, I'm a big fan of gradual cold therapy. And people are like assuming that, oh, I'm going to just go out at high UVB and I'm too hot. No. There's a buildup associated with all of these things where you can't just, especially if you have bad hypoglycemia, then your heat sinks are destroyed, which means you can't cool down in the heat. So first you must teach yourself to do that. Then you start slowly adding everything back.
Yeah, exactly. Love that.
Because it's, we shouldn't get confused and be like, well, I can't do it. You can't.
Yeah. It's like I did everything wrong in my journey. I was hypoglycemic and started getting into ketosis with a 3-day water fast. I don't recommend that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, like don't be like me. Don't do that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it can be hard because a lot of times the personality of someone who has hypoglycemia, this is a really interesting finding, by the way, is that every single one of my hypoglycemic clients have some of the following characteristics: perfectionistic tendencies, high achievers or type A personalities. We're often people pleasers, fawners, and we are often the eldest daughter, but not always. But that sort of grouping of traits, do you fall under that?
I don't know. I'm kind of like a be all let be kind of person. I don't understand, to be honest, the qualities between type A and type B. Like I would consider myself definitely like a go-getter, higher achiever.
Yeah.
But I'm not an organized by the traditional sense.
I'm not that organized either.
Okay.
I struggle with organization. Yeah.
No, I just don't think it's
perfectionistic.
Important.
Yeah.
No, I think I have a very unique life growing up compared to your average person. And if I hadn't had that, I think it would have been a lot of those things. But I grew up very differently. And so I'm the kind of person that doesn't care what other people think. I don't please anybody.
Good.
But if it hadn't been for all of those scenarios, like I was homeschooled from grade 3 to grade 8. I taught myself everything on my own because my mom was like, here's the pages you got to do. And we would do them as fast as possible and spend the rest of the day outside. And I got into horses very early and I trained my own horse as a kid. So I learned boundary setting. I learned not caring. Like I learned those things very early.
Yeah. Love
So
that.
I don't know. It could very easily have been me to a T if I didn't have such a different
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And I think that, so to clarify, I think that many people can get hypoglycemia, but the people who come see me who are really struggling with it are fit that personality type where it doesn't go away, often because the way that they approach it, it ends up kind of reinforcing things and making it worse because there's this underlying belief that the body is not safe, that I have to fix it. And so there's a lot of that like perfection, like I'm broken, I need to fix this. And then there's anxiety about it and I have to do this perfectly, or I have to do this exact thing, or I'm following these rules that I saw on Instagram, but they don't apply to me. That's not everybody, certainly, but that's a big percentage of people. And then there's people, for you, it feels more like physiological than stress driven. So there are some people, I mean, many people got it after COVID or the vaccines or a viral type flare up after different traumatic events. And so certain things, but yeah, there's what I see is that often the personality type where the hypoglycemia really sticks around, it's often that personality type that is trying to get it right and trying to, fix things and is very hypervigilant. Very often there's a hypervigilant quality of all my clients, myself too. I fit all of those. Every single one of those. That's me. And yeah, so that's also why we do a lot of mindset work, nervous system work. I use the Enneagram in my practice, which I'm obsessed with. And I so far, all of my hypoglycemia clients have been 9s, 1s, 2s, 6s, and I have 1 7. So I'm very interested in this. I don't know if you use the Enneagram at all.
I actually don't know what it is. I'm gonna
Oh.
look it up after this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to talk about that all day long. It's so cool. It's not just like a personality typing system. It's not based on your birth time or anything like that. I look at the Enneagram as a description of how your ego is, the architecture of your ego, essentially. And so it's like how we learn to keep ourselves safe. And so there's 9 types, and then there's different subtypes within those 9 types, but there's 9 core types. And we might relate to some different things in different types, but we have one primary energy, and it shows us our just so many things. It's so helpful to see yourself in that way. The Enneagram is really good at helping point out different blind spots that we have and different ways in which we don't really see ourselves as that. So I'm an Enneagram 1, which is called the reformer or the perfectionist. And so we're always trying to make everything better because there's a belief that we got somewhere in childhood that you're not good enough and you need to be better than you are. You must always be better than you are. The first time I read that sentence, I started hysterical crying. I was like, oh yeah, I certainly think that. So I get a lot of Enneagram 1s in my practice who are trying to like, I have to be better. I have to do this thing. This isn't good enough. And what I didn't realize was that I am angry. So each Enneagram type has a core, what's called a passion. And I didn't realize that the passion of the 1 is anger. And I was like, oh, I'm not angry. I get frustrated or annoyed, or I might judge or be critical or want to control things, but I may be resentful, but I'm not angry. And the reason why I don't feel anger is because 1s, we judge anger as being bad. And so we change it and we don't let it come out as anger. But what happens, why I'm even talking about this on a hypoglycemia podcast, is because so many of my clients have so many repressed emotions that are triggering their mitochondria to literally think that they are unsafe. And so our mitochondria are scanning our internal and external environment for threats. It's not only looking for LED lights. It's also seeing, wow, there's a lot of repressed rage inside of her, and there are not good things happening. So the mitochondria shift into different cell danger responses. They get stuck in a certain cell danger response. And that cell danger response doesn't fully resolve itself until the offending factor has gone away. So sometimes it starts because someone takes birth control or they have a bad case of COVID, but they never flip out of it because the body, it's almost like the body is creating these psychosomatic symptoms, these symptoms that are coming from something emotional, something from the nervous system. And so we can see our blood sugar line is very tied to our nervous system because of the stress hormones and all of that. So, I see this all interplay, and that's why we have to also work on feeling our emotions, because what happens with my really sort of severe hypoglycemics is that they have this sort of mind-body symptomatology a lot. And what happens is I see this every single blood sugar mastery round, that inevitably people are like, oh my God, I didn't have to have my mini meal before bed. My blood sugar is so stable. I haven't had a crash in 2 weeks. This is great. I'm sleeping through the night. My period was so good this month. And so all of a sudden, all these symptoms go away. But what does that do? It creates a vacuum. And so what wants to get filled in there, if there's an underlying belief that the body is not safe, that there's something wrong, that there's repressed emotions, and often I see there's something out there in my life, my relationship, my job, my career, my friendships, my money, the world, something out there is so scary. Guess what the body is going to do in these people? It's going to create symptoms so that they can look stuff up and try this new supplement and try this new protocol and change this thing and have some sense of control.
And I would say that I wouldn't even call it psychosomatic, because I think that from your biology and a biophysics standpoint, they both go down the same pathway. So whether you're having an emotional stressor or a physical stressor, they both go down the same pathway. And we know this intensely, even in research, most critically, I think, in broken heart syndrome, where there's such a huge change that has been cataloged, right, in not just the heart, but I've been digging into this a lot, but vortexes and blood and brain function and blood-brain barrier and all these things. So it's the same thing. It's not, you're getting very real symptoms in response to a very real thing, because your emotions are very real.
Yes, exactly. Your emotions create physical changes in your body. So it's very clear that that's what helps. So I have some people who, once they get rid of these blood sugar symptoms, we really, or even before that, we really have to start doing a lot of work to give the body that felt sense of safety, to sometimes feel repressed emotions, get in touch with our emotions, do some nervous system work. Because if there's that vacuum in that personality type, what's going to happen is you're going to start to get some other stuff. And I see this every round. I see, I'm starting to have a little flare up of some histamine stuff. Starting to have a little, like this weird gut thing, or like, I'm starting to get these, like there's something else that happens because the body is trying to keep you safe in this weird way. And so that's where a lot of this work, like that's why the Enneagram is a great tool to see ourselves and help us to know what growth looks like for each type. So as a 1, I'm always trying to perfect things, to control things. That's why I'm hypercritical of myself and the world around me. Like that's why I have this platform and all this. Is not the only reason, people can have a platform like this, but it's how I channel some of that and use it for good, right? But what happens is anger is really like a standing against reality. It's like I'm not okay with what's happening in reality. And so I'm wanting to change it. I'm wanting it to be different than it is. And so growth for a 1 is this place of serenity, which is allowing life to unfold exactly as it is and not as you think it should be. And so that's big, big healing for a 1 to allow. And that's one of the things that we can also do when we're getting some of these symptoms. Once you know that your blood sugar is not dropping super low and it's not dangerous, right? Like you're looking at it, you're like, my blood sugar is 90. I am not in danger right now, and this is not that severe. And so we can feel into our body and say, okay, I'm getting something to eat, but while I'm eating, maybe I don't need to panic and just eat drink orange juice and like do all these things.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna have a little bit of protein. I'm gonna have a little bit of this, and we can eat and we can say, it is safe to feel these symptoms. It is safe. Okay, where's the dizziness in my body? What does it feel like? Oh, it's in my head. My head feels a little bit like a balloon. It feels a little tingling. I feel my heart beating hard in my chest. And it's safe. It's safe. It's safe to feel those things. And so the more we can not trigger the sympathetic nervous system on top of the physical thing that's happening, and we can calm the body, you can see how allowing is such a powerful tool for helping to heal hypoglycemia. Of course, we're not going to just allow it to happen and just ignore it. But at a certain point, we can get to practicing that allowing. And sometimes, you know, the way that we work on our health, we address our health, is how we address a lot of other things in our world. So certainly people are like, I'm a perfectionist and I'm checking my numbers and I'm looking at my sleep stats and my CGM and my this. It's like, do you do that other places? Where it's like, yeah, probably you do that other places and not just with this area. So we can use how we address our health to look at other factors in our life where we're out of balance. Because, and the last thing I'll say is that a lot of people are like, okay, the goal of hypoglycemia is to not have blood sugar crashes. I would say that's missing a step. It's like, why are we doing any of this to begin with? Why are we aiming for health? It's because we hopefully want to do something with that health. What will you do once you have the energy, once you can sleep through the night, once you don't have to eat food all the time? Where a lot of people then just get stuck, especially in functional medicine, in this functional medicine cycle of just like, oh, now I'm going to do a mold test. Don't do a mold test. Now I'm going to do a gut test. No, don't go finding things to fix, because often the treatments make us worse. That's happened to me like 6 times. So 3 times. I don't want to exaggerate. 3 times I did testing and I did something and made it worse with all sorts of stuff. And so it's like, use that energy to find joy, to find things that light you up, to play, to bring connection into your life. So I think that so many of us just get stuck on this hamster wheel of trying to heal, trying to optimize. And it's like, we've got to take a hard look at what are we doing? Is our self-care the entire day? Is there an imbalance with other things in our life? Like, we can't even go to a restaurant, God forbid, there's a seed oil. It's like, I want to make a body that's resilient enough to once in a blue moon go out to a restaurant and not be stressed by a seed oil, because my body is strong and resilient. I'm not downing seed oil. I don't have seed oils in this house. But I believe personally, this is my personal belief, that a resilient body should be able to tolerate some things once in a while. Like, yeah, I'm in front of, the Wi-Fi's on, whatever. Okay, good. I don't have this router, like I don't have it hardwired, but I'm choosing to believe that my body is strong and resilient. And those beliefs every single day are really, really helping us. And I'm sure in the quantum realm, they've already caught up with, the mechanism there. I don't quite know it yet, but yeah.
The thing is, like, I think that's applies to every single thing that you're trying to fix. That the clients that heal the fastest and that achieve the most incredible results are the ones that believe it's possible. And, you talked a lot about emotions and how you feel and anger. And I have to throw this in as somebody who is a really big fan of like equine assisted therapy, that, when you have anger, or when we confuse one emotion with another, we create resistance, and not just resistance that is undeniably there because animals respond to that. And especially horses, because they're prey animals. So your body is responding exactly the way they respond. So if you're blocking this anger and turning it into resentment, then that response is what's happening on the inside. That you would see if you were in front of a horse, the way they would respond to you is such a mirror to your true emotions and the confusion. And that's what's happening on the inside of you. So it applies to everything, what you said about that. And I think that as a society, we identify with disease.
Yes.
This is the biggest problem and biggest step towards healing. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I fixed my hyperglycemia, but my identity is that there's something wrong with me, which means that if it's not hyperglycemia, now it has to be something else because
Yes.
I refuse to let go of that identity. Same with perfectionism or ADD
Yeah.
or ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
People tell it to me all the time. There's nothing you can do. I'm ADD. Okay, if that's what you believe, then you're right.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be the ADD, ADHD person, then let's talk. You don't need to, but you have to be like, I'm going to change my identity.
Absolutely. The stories that we tell ourselves sometimes are so disempowering. We don't even realize that we collapse stories onto what is happening in reality. We think that, so if this is reality, this hand is reality, and this hand is a story. We collapse the two and we're only seeing the story and we think that's the reality. And so we're like, well, I always have this issue. So I am this way. And and it's, as you said, it's truly disempowering and it boxes us in and it gives us no options. And so if a story is empowering you, no matter what it is, keep it. Like it's been empowering for me lately to be like, my body can handle that. I was never like that. Like that's new for me. And I feel like I've gotten to this point in my health journey where that's my next step because I am resilient and I don't want to keep staying in this sort of paradigm of, oh, I have to heal and optimize and like, oh, I'm gonna that feels disempowering. It almost feels like this victim mentality, like my body can't do it on its own, so I have to help. And I believe that stepping into my body is fully capable of healing itself. That's really where the quantum circadian stuff has really empowered me because you stick your body outside and, obviously there's more to it than that, but so much healing happens because we're in an environment that is encouraging that healing. And so there's like nature,
Yeah.
love. That's what
I
this
have
is. And so if we're
tons
in,
of
yeah.
crazy stories of, the things that happen to me when I go from here to when I visit my mom in El Salvador, when I go to El Salvador, right? Like the huge changes that I've experienced physically just by, like you said, like you just plug back into nature. Obviously,
Hmm.
there's multiple things that involves, but let's think of it simply. Just
Yeah.
get back to where we were. But I want to bring it back to something you said about
Hmm.
identity before
Hmm.
we run out on time and blame and GLP-1s. So
Mm,
I saw, this whole thing where now PCOS is PMOS, which
hmm.
brings metabolic into the whole thing. And I'm actually not I wasn't up to date to that. So until I saw your post on it
Yeah.
and then the GLP-1 thing, I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense because
Yeah.
they need another avenue for the top grossing medication category in the world right now.
Hmm.
And this idea of identifying with disease and identifying with the idea that you can't heal is
Hmm.
driving the need for GLP-1s.
Yeah.
Everybody, and I wanted to hear how you feel about that as well. But this is kind of how I feel about it. Like,
Mhm.
never mind, I'm not even going to pretend that I understand all of the breakdown on how GLP-1s affects your pathways and vagus nerve and, blah,
Mhm.
blah, 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 because that's so complicated.
Yeah.
But the point is that there's another way.
Yeah, there is. And so whether GLP-1s, like whether that was the main motive, I know someone, uh, a dietitian just messaged on my post and she said, respectfully, like not everything's a conspiracy. Like people have been pushing for this for so long. I think follow the money. I
Exactly.
don't
Follow
think
the
it's a
money.
conspiracy. I just think follow the money.
Yeah.
You know, and this is a business, and they were probably like, "Wow, we could give them what they want, and we can make cash money." You know, so who knows? I'm not trying to say that I know the reason, but isn't it interesting that now that the standard of care instead of being the birth control pill is or might be or again is might be, I don't have the full story, might be GLP-1s. Now, it just makes sense. Oh, okay, we could change it to metabolic because now we have something to help that, right? And so, yes, GLP-1s can certainly help improve a lot of things about your metabolic health. Absolutely. It can help insulin sensitivity. It can help lower glucose spikes. It can reduce visceral fat. It can lower blood pressure. It can reduce all sorts of risk of cardiac stuff and improve your A1C. Yeah, sure. But so can like my program, Blood Sugar Mastery, working on your metabolic health. And it doesn't come with all the side effects that GLP-1s come with. So I'm not saying no one's a bad person for taking a GLP-1. It doesn't have to be a moral thing. For some people, it's a lifesaver. Some people have been doing this work for years and years and years, and they just want to lose weight and they haven't been able to, and they want to do it. And that's their prerogative. And I don't want anyone to feel judged or manipulated in any way. I want to talk to the people who might feel pressured that that's their only option, and it isn't. And there are documented side effects, and those side effects are going to keep building, of course. But there's some kind of concerning side effects, not just like, oh, gastroparesis and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, okay, GLP-1s are used with the population of people who are severely type 2 diabetic, right? They already are at risk for gastroparesis and things like that. But I think that there's other impacts that are happening more often to now people we see who are taking these things, maybe who don't have type 2 diabetes, who are taking for other reasons. So there's documented or just emerging negative effects beyond some of those physical things like the gastroparesis, things like where emotions are blunted, where there's this thing called anhedonia, where the loss of joy of doing the things that you used to do, and just reduced joy. It can cause there's links with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, reduced libido, sexual dysfunction, fatigue, low energy, reduced drive, certainly menstrual changes, muscle loss things, but it's impacting that reward center of the brain. So yeah, it certainly quiets the food noise, but it also quiets the reward from doing a lot of normal things. So we don't get that same amount of joy that we might have had.
And I mean, I'm not as nice as you. I'll just be straight up about it.
Sure.
And I'm going to say that it has nothing to do with the person taking it. Everybody has a choice to do and take whatever it is that they want, and they don't owe anybody an explanation at all, not me or anybody else. But that doesn't change the fact that the risks are higher than how well it works. And I think that there's a lot of things that help. The question I always ask is at what cost?
Exactly.
Like most of the things that you and I have in common that we talk about, like light and all these things, they have no downside. There is no downside to you wearing blue blockers at night. There is no downside to you hardwiring your television. There is no downside, so you have nothing to lose. But with other choices, like a GLP-1, what they're making it sound like is that you have little to lose. Look at all these benefits.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's why I wanted to talk about those side effects that people might not know. And it's just like with the birth control. They shove that down everybody's throat. I'm sure they, encouraged you to take it. My doctor, when I got diagnosed with PCOS, forced me to take a prescription of the pill with me outside, like out of his office, and I ripped it up in the car. I was like, no, I'm not taking this. So, they're forceful with their medication. They're like, well, this is the option, but it's an option that only kind of works when you're taking it. So the results also decline after you've taken it for a while. I mean, again, I don't want to judge anyone who is making this decision. I just want people to have informed consent, you know? And it's like, know that there are risks, know that this is not a long-term solution, and, that the costs might outweigh the benefit at some point. Or someone just takes it because they want to start seeing results, and then they develop a healthy lifestyle, and then they get off of it and they maintain their benefits because all of a sudden they feel motivated, they felt comfortable enough to get into, into a gym or working out or getting out in the sun and exposing their stomach. So I don't want to like hate on people who might use that. And I'm not encouraging it, but I just want people, just my personal, to feel like I don't want to judge what could be a tool in someone's toolbox. And so I think that we just have to know that it's just that. It's just a tool. It's not this like panacea, and that you should do your due diligence and look into it before you move forward with doing something like that. And there's natural options that work amazingly well. Like my clients wean off of high blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications, thyroid medications, 5 bipolar medications. My client Kathy got off of depression meds, anxiety meds. So all sorts of things are getting so much better from doing the work that I do on metabolic health that doesn't have to do without pharmaceuticals. We're getting off pharmaceuticals. So
yeah. And the thing is, I think just because my podcast is named The Decentralized Mind because of the thinking differently, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think that the same question that people believe that when someone speaks out, and this is really common, like, I'm part of a bunch of local moms group for, I don't know what reason, but anyways, people are always talking about GLP-1s and people are always afraid of being judged. And this is an issue that I think we've integrated into our society and that we're integrating into our children. You should fear being judged. What will people think? But my argument is it's time that we find a way to teach people or show people, whatever the right word is, I don't know, that it's time for you to not care whether or not someone's going to judge you. And I get that that's easy for me to say as somebody who's never cared what people thought. You know what I mean? But I think that that's a skill that we should be teaching to kids, to adults, to whatever, because we can talk about a medication. We can talk about a money, traced decision, without offending people.
Sure.
That's again, just my personal beliefs. In
I
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. I think that there's room for lots of different voices, and I think certain things are going to just resonate with other people, like with different people. I also think you might be an Enneagram 8. So when you look it up, let me know if you resonate most with the 8.
I'll let you know. I'll definitely look it up. I have a really hard time with anything that involves identifying. So when somebody wants to identify me, I'm like, no.
Yeah,
I don't
and
fit in a box.
that comes up with the Enneagram. People are like, you can't put me in a box. And what the response is to that is that you put yourself in a box and you don't know that you are. And so the Enneagram allows you to see the shape of the boxes that you put yourself in so you can get out of them. And it's about healing so that you don't look like those types anymore. And so it's teaching you it's not trying to box you in, saying, here's your tendencies, here's where you go when you're stressed, here's where you go in growth. And it's really just using it as like a blueprint to get to a higher state, but it's not trying to box you in. But yeah, I know some people are like, I don't want to be typed, and that's okay. You don't have to do it. If it doesn't resonate, throw it out.
I don't mind doing it. I just,
sure.
I'm a little rebellious.
That's 8 with a 7 wing of you, I feel.
So, I will look it up because I'm curious. Above all else, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
So I ask, this is a little off topic because we spent a lot of the podcast talking about blood sugar and not a lot talking about mind, although we did bring that in a little bit. I ask people who come on my podcast, who do the sunrise, who get outside, who ground, who do all these things. In your journey doing all these things, has your perspective on going towards outside authority when it comes to life and death changed?
That is such an interesting question. 100%. I started believing in God. I started watching near-death experiences, so I have a very different understanding of death. And I, yeah, kind of fall under, I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to box myself in, but yeah, I certainly believe that most of what we've been taught has been a lie.
Yeah. I
So
think that's
yeah,
generally everybody who
yeah,
does this
yeah,
has responded the same way, that it has
yeah.
changed their
That's so funny.
experience.
Wow. Very interesting question. I love that.
It's what brought
Very
me to
cool.
start the podcast. So yeah,
Yes, I love it.
so I feel like it wouldn't be right to
Mhm.
do this and not ask.
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Before we wrap up, can you maybe share best ways people can interact with you, where to find you? Of course, I'm gonna have all your links in the notes.
sure, yeah. So I hang out a lot on Instagram. My handle is Danielle Hamilton Health. That's also my website, .com. And I have all my offerings on my website for working together. If you know of anyone struggling with hypoglycemia, I do incorporate all of the quantum circadian strategies in there because it's a really important way of sending safety to the body, which is the main thing that we're trying to do in all different ways through our diet, through our light environment, through our emotions, our self talk, trying to send safety signals to the body. And yeah, so what else? My podcast, I've stopped doing my podcast, but the episodes are still up there. It's called Light Up Your Metabolism. And I'm just working on some new projects now. I'm working on my Stop the Drops YouTube channel, which is in the works, and Stop the Drops DIY program because some people who have this issue they can't work. So I'm trying to make some lower cost options for people who are really struggling out there. So yeah.
Awesome. Well,
So
thank you so much.
yeah.
And thanks,
Thanks for having
everyone.
me on.
You're welcome. And thank you to all the listeners.
Thanks everyone.